CNBC's American Greed, celebrating 15 seasons and 200 episodes of scams, hustles, and frauds.
All you needed was to come into the room, swear loyalty to the Stratton way of life, and we would show you how to get rich.
Take a deep dive into the crimes of Wall Street's most notorious crooks.
Even the world's greatest attorney can't save you if you're caught red-handed.
Convicted stockbroker Jordan Belfort, a.k.a. the Wolf of Wall Street.
He's funny, he's colorful, he can be charming as long as you stay 10 feet away with your wallet in your back pocket.
I had a gift to get up before the crowd and sell and manipulate. And I could have used it for good or I could have used it for evil. I used it for evil.
When Hollywood turns his life of sex, drugs, and crime into a blockbuster, his victims feel cheated again.
Too many people walk out of a movie and think they have seen the story, and it leaves out significant parts of the story, not the least of which is 1,500 people that lost real money.
He was about as close as you could come to being a financial serial killer.
There were probably 75 people that were prosecuted, people in the securities industry, accountants, lawyers.
As part of their punishment, Belfort and Porish must jointly pay $110 million in restitution. The men are required to pay 50% of all future earnings toward the fund. The first down payment is made when the government seizes more than $10 million worth of assets from Belfort.
Cars, houses, jewelry, bank accounts, all of those assets are ultimately forfeited to the government. Belfort's home in Old Brookville was seized by us. His beach home in Southampton, Long Island.
In 2004, Belfort is sent to the Taft Federal Correctional Institution outside of Bakersfield, California. After living a drug-fueled existence for most of the past decade, it's only fitting that his cellmate is none other than Tommy Chong, one half of the stoner comedy duo Cheech and Chong.
Of all the inmates in the entire federal prison system, he gets Tommy Chong as his cellmate, who was in prison for, I think, selling bongs across state lines back then.
While in prison, Belfort entertains his cellmate with wild tales of life at Stratton. The two become close friends.
You know, what do you do when you're in jail? You have a lot of time, so you tell stories. I would tell him stories, and he would tell me stories, and he would say to me, "God, you should write a book."
Belfort follows Chong's advice and starts putting pen to paper. He also enters a prison rehab program. After 22 months behind bars, Jordan Belfort is released early for good behavior.
I think he should have been in jail longer. I mean, 2 years. 2 years for wrecking thousands of people's lives.
Upon release, Belfort moves to Manhattan Beach, California, just south of Los Angeles, where he finishes writing his autobiography. In 2007, Random House publishes his first book, The Wolf of Wall Street. It's a vulgar and hedonistic romp filled with sex, drugs, and deviant behavior.
And I was just writing the truth as it came out of my head. And this is what I wrote. And then some of that I look back, I'm like, oh, but it was true.
Those who know Belfort find the book's title amusing.
Never heard anybody call him the Wolf of Wall Street. First time I learned of it was when I picked up a copy of his book and came to learn that he was claiming that that was his nickname.
The book is a modest success, but it generates plenty of buzz. In 2007, Jane Wells interviews Belfort on his book tour. He says he's a changed man.
I believe everyone is entitled to be forgiven. I didn't murder anybody. It's not as bad as that. It's not. It was a financial crime. I have a chance to maybe not reverse what I did, but to try to make good on it.
Wednesday, January 5th, a new season of Greed begins on CNBC. Theranos goes to trial.
She was the next big thing.
Sex and scandal.
I had just graduated high school. He would ask me to go out for a couple of drinks.
Boeing's soaring greed.
What caused this brand new plane to crash?
Anything for money.
He ran a criminal syndicate, millions of dollars.
American Greed, new season starts Wednesday, January 5th on CNBC. It's one of the biggest cases of insider trading in history, and it's all caught on tape.
I think this stock could go to $10, but we got to keep this radio silent.
Ratnam had it all. A wildly successful hedge fund, billions in the bank, and the respect of Wall Street.
Roger was a competitor first. He wanted to win. He wanted to win every day.
But behind closed doors, Roger Ratnam was gaming the system to the tune of $75 million.
Inside trading became his business model.
And each time Roger Ratnam's phone is ringing, the feds are listening. And ultimately, it's his own voice that will seal his fate.
It's kind of like taking a bite out of the forbidden fruit, except for here, he was feasting on the forbidden fruit.
By now, McKinsey consultant Anil Kumar has been funneling information to Roger Ratnam for 2 years. In August of 2008, he's the source of some major news about AMD. A foreign company has just agreed to a multi-billion-dollar cash infusion.
Hey, Raj.
Yeah, hi, Anil.
Hi. So yesterday they've shaken hands and said they're going ahead with the deal. So I think you can now just buy.
Great. How much are they investing?
They'll probably say they'll put up to 6 to 8 billion.
You think we should start buying it now?
Yeah. I think this stock could go to $10, right? But we got to keep this radio silent.
Oh, please. That is my pleasure.
Not even to your little boyfriends,
No, believe me, I don't have any friends.
Okay.
With Chiesi, you knew that there was a little bit of back and forth. They were competing with each other to some extent. So they're kind of playing this game a little bit of who can get the best information, who can use it.
So I have their numbers.
AMD, so they that bad?
1600. See, came to the right place to get that information. Tell me I'm the best in AMD now. Right?
I know, babe. Look, I never say you're not the best. It's hard to compete with you, but one day I will surpass you.
Right? This is AMD. IBM I can't crack. I must defer to you on IBM.
And Akamai, too.
Akamai, too. But AMD, bring it on, baby.
The wiretaps are devastating. They show Rajaratnam as someone who was just constantly working people and bringing in as much information as he could and not thinking at all about the law.
In the end, agents record more than 2,400 phone conversations. The calls reveal a tangled web of sources, creating the largest case of insider trading ever.
I think he felt a sense of power, that he had access to information that no one else had, and that he was able to profit by it.
On October 13, 2011, Rajaratnam is sentenced to 11 years in prison and ordered to forfeit $63.8 million. It's the longest sentence for an insider trading case ever. But the worst isn't over yet for Rajaratnam. A judge orders Rajaratnam to pay $92.8 million to settle the civil case.
The message to Wall Street is very loud, it's very clear. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Ebers is an amazing story because he came from nothing and was on top of the financial world. I mean, he was worth billions.
Bernard Ebers, CEO of WorldCom, rises from rags to riches.
Mr. Ebers, what is your response to the verdict?
And then falls from pinstripes to prison stripes.
Don't push, guys, don't push. Get out of the way.
But when he tumbles, Ebers brings thousands of investors down with him.
People that invest in the stock were definitely victims to a con game.
There is big trouble this morning for the nation's second biggest long-distance provider. WorldCom said last night that an internal investigation has uncovered massive accounting fraud, almost $4 billion in disguised expenses, in what could become one of the biggest accounting scandals in U.S. history.
WorldCom's board fires CFO Scott Sullivan. But the big question on everyone's mind is, what did Bernie Ebers know? The Justice Department launches an investigation. What they discover will cause the biggest bankruptcy in U.S. history. Additional WorldCom audits place the total accounting fraud at $11 billion.
There's fallout tonight from the...
On March 24, 2004, the feds filed criminal charges.
WorldCom, the company's former CEO, Bernie Ebers, was charged today with falsely inflating earnings at the long-distance phone company to the tune of $11 billion. WorldCom's former chief financial officer, Scott Sullivan, agreed today to plead guilty to the same charges and cooperate with prosecutors.
In January of 2005, Bernie Ebers stands trial in Lower Manhattan. In opening arguments, prosecutors say Bernie Ebers was motivated by greed. His wealth was all tied up in WorldCom stock. And when the stock started to tumble, he authorized an accounting fraud to help prop up the company. Key to the prosecution's case is the testimony of Chief Financial Officer Scott Sullivan.
Scott Sullivan said that Bernie Evers told him to hit the numbers, so he went ahead and he found a way to meet those numbers.
On March 15, 2005, the jury has a decision. The verdict: Bernie Evers is guilty of conspiracy and securities fraud.
He seemed a little misty as he came out of the courtroom. This clearly was a blow. This was a total turnaround for someone who was at the pinnacle of corporate America.
These guys were on the quest to make money fast, and they were going to do it any way they possibly could.
A couple of young traders want inside information, and they'll do anything to get it.
What if we recruit strippers to solicit information from Wall Street bankers about deals going down while they're having a lap dance?
On August 11, 2006, federal agents pull over Eugene Plotkin's black BMW on his way to work and slap on the cuffs. Plotkin tells them they've got the wrong guy.
He certainly asserted his innocence through his lawyer. I don't think he was saying anything, and we were busy starting to prepare as if we were going to go to trial with him.
After his arrest, Plotkin sits down for an exclusive interview with Fortune magazine and tries to distance himself from Peitchen.
The way Plotkin put it is that they were acquaintances. He said, "I wouldn't call us close." Now, as we all know, they were pretty darn close. They certainly played the game that they didn't know each other very well. It was in both of their interests when they were caught to blame it on the other guy. Peitchen got to it first because he was caught first and got the better deal. Whoever speaks first in any kind of criminal investigation tends to get the better deal.
Plotkin pleads guilty and is eventually sentenced to nearly 5 years in prison. David Peitchen's punishment? He's released on time served, since he cut the deal with authorities.
Often these crimes are so complicated and so well covered up that until somebody flips and decides to cooperate, it's hard to bring everyone involved to justice.
In total, 6 people plead guilty to various charges ranging from conspiracy to securities fraud. They include the men who worked at the Business Week printing plant and Stanislav Spiegelman, who's sentenced to 3 years in prison. 13 people, including Monica Vujovic and Sonia Antichevich, face civil suits by the SEC. It's one of the largest insider trading rings in recent history.
In terms of insider trading cases, I believe this was one of the largest, most complex, certainly one of the most bizarre.
Both Peitchen and Plotkin were success stories until this all happened.
Peitchen and Plotkin, once living the American dream, with honest jobs on Wall Street, until greed got the best of them. He's young, self-assured, and loaded.
The cars and the houses and the money, he was living a pretty fast-paced life.
Tony Elgindy claims to be a crusader, fighting fraud on Wall Street.
He wanted to be known as the greatest short seller of all time. He wanted that following.
He had a persona that he cultivated, a bad guy going good.
But this so-called good guy is running an insider trading scam. And his partner in crime is a crooked FBI agent.
This wasn't a crusade for good, it was a crusade for evil.
I would go on the computers in the FBI, and I would search for that company. I would search for the president, vice president, CEO, CFO, whatever. I would do a complete search and see if there was any SEC or FBI activity on this case.
As an FBI agent, he had the sort of keys to the whole law enforcement library of what federal law enforcement was doing. It was everything from the write-ups of interviews with witnesses, descriptions of how investigations were being conducted, descriptions of sources, people that were providing information to the government.
If he discovers inside information, he funnels the news to Elgindy.
The truth was that he was stealing information from the FBI, and they were using that information to target specific companies for short selling, stock price manipulation, and extortion.
In 2000, Elgindy believes there's fraud taking place at Seaview, a company pitching underwater cameras. Royer taps into FBI databases and discovers an ongoing probe into the Florida-based business for issuing deceptive press releases. He passes the tip to Elgindy. Now, armed with information only investigators would know, Elgindy shorts the stock and tells his Anthony Pacific subscribers to do the same.
It was integral to the scheme that the site subscribers trade on the stock because this is a short selling scheme. And the idea is that the short selling combined with the eventual publication to the general public of negative information can push down the price of the stock.
After Elgindy's attack, Seaview's stock plummets more than 70% of its value in 90 days. Eventually, the SEC files suit against the company. But not before Elgindy boasts about making out with $750,000 in a single trade. It's not pretty, it's not nice, and it's not legal. On January 24, 2005, the jury finds Elgindy guilty on charges of insider trading, racketeering, and extortion. His FBI sidekick, Jeff Royer, is also convicted on securities fraud, racketeering conspiracy, and obstruction of justice charges.
Locked up in a federal prison for committing fraud, Perry Griggs shouldn't be a threat anymore.
8 years in prison's a long time. I didn't think that we'd hear from him again.
But this is no ordinary con man. This prisoner is prospering with a new scheme.
From inside the prison walls, he was able to convince people he was a millionaire commodities trader and have them invest their money with a man in jail.
And before anyone is on to his scam, Griggs gets released.
Perry had left in a hurry, so this became an active fugitive investigation,
leaving his victims with nothing.
Our property is taken illegally. This actually rips the soul.
For 11 months, FBI agent Tom Simon builds a white-collar crime case against the Griggs. Only when he has their indictment in hand does he ramp up the search effort.
The FBI had arranged to have billboards showing the pictures of Perry and Rochelle Griggs with "Wanted by the FBI" on them throughout the highways in the United States. So in the fall of 2010, my phone was ringing off the hook with well-meaning people who swore they saw Perry and Rochelle driving the other way down the highway.
But lead after lead ends up nowhere. Until December 2010, when a tip comes in, placing the Griggs in Arizona and providing a possible cell phone number. But the number doesn't work.
So what I did was I used what I consider to be a sophisticated investigative technique that I'm happy to share with you today. I Googled the phone number. And when I Googled it, the first thing that came up was a Craigslist ad from Kingman, Arizona. "We'll paint your house for cash. Call this number."
Agents eventually track down the location of the man who placed the ad to a seedy rooming house. They believe he's really Perry Griggs.
Once they had the name of the rooming house, the FBI agents in Kingman, Arizona stormed it and found Perry and Rochelle hiding there and finally placed them under arrest.
Griggs gets a 7-year prison sentence, serving time in a special terrorism unit in Terre Haute, Indiana, with limited supervised access to phone and computer. The prison is known as Guantanamo North. American Greed. Some people will do anything for money. Watch the new season on a new night, Wednesday, 10 Eastern, starting January 5th, CNBC. Get yours.